Today is February 26th, 2026, and welcome to this episode of the New Possibilities Hour, part of the Will Work for Food project founded by Natalie Armstrong Motan in 2020. Every Thursday, Gene Lawler, Michael Schwimmer, David Schraga, and I are delighted to co-host another webinar, cutting-edge webinar, for mediators, arbitrators, lawyers, and everybody who negotiates. As you likely know, there's no charge for these great programs. Rather, we invite you to contribute to a food bank if you're in a position to contribute and you like what you see. And every week, one of my favorite parts of the program is when we announce the running total of just how much our generous audiences have contributed in honor of our great speakers since the series began. Natalie Armstrong Motan, would you please do the honors?
Jeff, thanks so much for the introduction. So people tell us on the regular how much they've donated, and we really appreciate that you let us know about your monetary donations. But we also love hearing about any hours that you volunteer, because your time is just as valuable. So if you are one of the fantastic people who donates time and energy to your local food bank, let us know. We'd love to add that to the running total as well. But this week, Jeff, happy to report we have received information about $939 or $939,000, $138.42 in donations to food banks worldwide. And that is tens of millions of meals that our industry has provided to its neighbors.
That is so cool.
Wow. That is just fabulous. Thank you so much, Natalie. And we have another great presentation today. Our friend Jacinta Gallant from Canada will be speaking to us on what's the problem with problem solving. And Jacinta is a mediator, lawyer, and educator, a cutting-edge thinker. And we're just going to turn it right over to you, Jacinta. We're all looking forward to it. Please tell us a little bit about the food bank to which you would like people to contribute if they're able to do so. And then on with your presentation. The floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Natalie. I asked you to choose one because I understood that many of the participants are in the US, and so I can't remember which one we settled on.
So we decided to support the World Central Kitchen. They have a massive global reach, do really good work, provide fantastic services. So I've put a link in the chat. Please, if you're able, support World Central Kitchen or your local food bank.
And another interesting just tip on fundraising or contributing is one of the things that we do in our office is monthly we pick something that we're going to donate to, and we'll choose someone who comes in, say that they want like a will draft. It's something that's fairly easy to put a price on and say, in return for our drafting, we're going to make a contribution on your behalf to this particular charity. So if you like that idea, it's another way to both monetize your contribution and be rewarded for your time. Okay, so I am on the east coast of Canada, Prince Edward Island. We have a lot of snow. Anyone here from New England area, you got even more than we do. But I want you to know that I am basically, I spend a lot of my time handling this. Natalie, tell me if it can't be heard. It's really over. Yeah. So I mediate all kinds of conflicts, but my day job's pretty much separation and divorce. So I'm basically dealing with situations where people are coming to my office with a pretty serious set of emotional upset. So tell me that you're leaving. Some of them are quite sad, thinking about what's happened and what their future is, and others are already they've already moved on. They've already moved on. I found a love for me. Darling, just so that they're so happy they're almost They've moved on already. They're already crazy in love. And they're like you. as the practitioner, as the professional who's helping, it's not always clear what the emotional climate will be, both in the joint sessions and when I'm meeting with clients individually. Because I've got clients who are sometimes coming to this with complex financial pictures. They're feeling quite a lot of worry about a future that's going to be dire. I don't know how many of you are mediating where there's finances at play, but many of you are. And so I find it's complicated because sometimes we've got clients who are showing up who are mad about what just happened, or they're worried about the future. They're often sharing the extent to which they disagree about things. And in my world, a lot of times they're fighting about what happened last week. They're fighting about money. And honestly, they're often fighting about
who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs
it can be really hard to manage the emotions in the room. And I found that in my work, as I was moving into more workplace mediations and working with organizations, no surprise, but it was the same emotional climate. We had people who were feeling quite a different array of emotions. And one of the big challenges that I found was that you would go from sadness, basically, seriously, the saddest song that Adele ever released. You know, you've got people who are coming in who are feeling very sad. But you've also got people who are coming in feeling
draw the cat eyes sharp enough to
very
kill a
mad.
man. You did some bad things, but I'm the worst of them.
So what I have found is
Sometimes I
that
wonder which
there are
one will be your
times
last lie.
in my work that I feel like we are seriously, we're on the highway to hell, when really where we want to get to is we want to find a way to walk up and build the stairs to the stairway to heaven. So with that musical introduction, I wanted to just offer some insights into the challenges that we face every day, and almost like, what the hell? What made us choose this day job? So what really did it for me was, as a lawyer and a mediator, as a conflict resolution educator as well, and working in collaborative practice, I find that there are times when my sincere, and I mean I'm sincere, efforts to help other people meet resistance. Do you ever find that? Now, I can't see everybody's faces. It's way more fun for me in the interactive bits if you do put your video on, but I also understand it's really early in parts of this. Some of you, it's 8 a.m. and you might not have had your coffee yet. So what I want to do is share a few slides, come back and ask some questions, a few more slides, so that I can set up a context and even a theoretical foundation for understanding what the hell's the problem when we're trying to problem solve. So here we go. My slides visible, Natalie? Yes?
Yes, great.
Thank
Yep.
you. Okay, so like seriously, we're trained, we're highly skilled professionals, and it seems so simple. People come to us with a problem and they want us to help them find a solution. And so there's all these different processes and designs that we can get around problem solving. We're trained, we follow steps, we trust a process, we have skills. Those of us that work in an empowering and facilitating manner know that we want to empower the client to make the best decisions. And sometimes, damn it, they're just not feeling it. They're just not with us. And so as the professionals, we have to find a way to manage the resistance to our very skillful interventions. Find a way to be effective when we're meeting resistance. And truly, how many times have you said, or under your breath or out loud, look, I'm just trying to help. And so this session is about that, because sometimes problem solving is the problem. I'd like you to think about a time when you met client resistance, and I'd like you to imagine a time that's you and a client, not you and your partner or you helping someone else manage their problems. This is you, and you're meeting resistance to your helpful efforts to problem solve. I'm going to ask you to think about what was the behavior that told you there was resistance. What were you observing that sent the signal to your brain, there's resistance here? And then we'll talk about what did you do in response to the behavior, and then what happened next. And so if anyone's brave enough to share an example, here's a good lead. Pick a time where your response to this resistance actually didn't help, right? So that you can bring in an example of an imperfect moment where you were meeting resistance, something was sending the signal of resistance to you, and what you did made it worse. Does that ever happen in your practice?
Yes, Jacinta, it has happened from time to time
Uh-huh.
for me that I think I have a great idea and somebody resists it. And I have sometimes made the mistakes of trying to become more forceful, doing everything from raising my voice to speak more loudly to going into more detail as if more logic, pouring on more logic is going to help.
Yeah.
And sometimes when getting very frustrated, there have been a few times when a little condescension has crept into my voice.
No, Jeff, really? Okay, like
Well,
you
not
said,
recently, not
no,
recently.
not recently. No. And never while we're getting paid, right? I always laugh and say my skills are so much more elevated when I'm in a retained moment, like someone's paying me. In my personal life, I fall into the very same traps that I'm going to try to identify with you. So, Jeff, thank you for that brilliant and humble admission of something that we've all seen. So it's a perfect setup. Let me carry on. What happens typically is that we meet these kinds of behaviors. Someone's going to raise their voice. We've seen people interrupting us if it's our own conflict and we're in it. We've seen people interrupting each other when it's their conflict and our job is to be on it. There's justifying, there's repeating, there's yeah, but, which is a real strong signal of not listening. People withdraw. Sometimes people leave. People don't respond. My favorite, finger pointing. And those of us who are lawyers are particularly good at Exhibit A, which may not be produced with those words, but basically we're going to prove our point. Sometimes you might have noticed that reassuring, someone might say, oh, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. That alone can lead to more defending. And so what the heck's going on? Because a typical response is very much like what Jeff described and looks very much like the same behaviors I'm describing right now as defensive behaviors. When people are feeling defensive, they're going to defend, and they're typically going to use behaviors that fit these characteristics. And it might be like this: don't worry, everything is going to be okay. Or particularly those of us who are experts, I have a lot of experience with this, and I can assure you. Or, the word actually is never a good start. So actually, you might as well not say anything further because you're going to just get more defending. But actually, the evidence supports this. Or that's not going to happen. Or that's not going to happen, depending on your tone of voice. We tried that and it didn't work. If you're working in shuttle situations, I'll take you to the other side, but it's not likely. I'd like to help you be more productive. Why don't you try? So this all fits in the category of suggesting or informing or educating or doing the things that fit the criteria of telling or explaining. And so we often get this response: you don't understand. You clearly don't care. I'm out of here. I don't know why I thought you'd want to help. Fine, whatever. Or more extreme or more subtle versions of a repeat of defensive. So what I want to explore today in our short time together is how neuroscience helps us understand these moments, how a dominant problem-solving model that's being used in negotiation, mediation, and arbitration truly around the world has some problems. And how we can work with new ways of seeing the behaviors that get in the way of productive discussion and problem solving, and how we can do this by understanding the power of curiosity. It's not just a buzzword. So in this slide, I summarize the research that talks about what happens when you experience me to really want to understand you. You're going to calm down. You can't help it. Satisfaction, security, tension relief. If you were to stop and reflect on a moment where you experienced the power of someone wanting to understand you, I'm sure you can relate to that experience. And so it's the opposite of what happens when people feel threatened, when people feel defensive. Then they're experiencing anxiety, fear, and stress. So when we feel understood, or even if I experience you to want to understand me, I'm going to relax and open up. My personality type, the way, the extent of the problem, all of those things will factor into it, but you cannot fight the neuroscience. If I experience you to really want to understand me, I'm going to experience satisfaction, security, and tension relief. And if I'm feeling threatened, my values, my identity, my financial situation, all the many ways that our clients experience threat have to do with the content of their dispute, but it also is just the fact that even if it's not a rational thing to worry about, because objectively speaking, you're going to be fine. It doesn't matter, because when I'm impacted by threat, I'm cognitively impaired. I'm impaired by these emotions, and I can't open up and look at new possibilities. I will become certain that this dire future that I fear, or my certainty that you're really out to get me, is going to be further entrenched when I'm forced to defend. And so if you look back at the challenge that we see in our arbitration, mediation, negotiation rooms, is if you were to really say what gets in the way of our problem solving, what gets in the way of our helping our clients find those solutions, what gets in the way is usually the behavior of, okay, the clients. I mean, yeah, we can be problematic too, but if our job is to facilitate their discussion, if our job is to make sure they have all the information they need so that they can make good decisions, arbitrators, I guess I'm not talking about you, although I think you care about all of this. If they're going to be the ones that are making the decisions about their future, we can harness the power of curiosity by knowing that all of us have an inherent desire for self-disclosure. When you invite me to share more about myself, it feels good. Okay? So when we can relate to that on a personal level, let's bring it to our professional world and just really know that it gets as deep as the emotion of feeling loved. When someone feels heard and understood, it's as close to being loved as to be almost indistinguishable. This is a quote from David Augsburger. And so let's find someone to blame, would you say? Are you with me? So one of the challenges we have is that the default that most negotiator, mediator, arbitrator, people in the field are using is the interest-based model. Some variation on it, and it's infused most problem-solving models. So I'm going to use the term that Fisher and Urey created. Let's remember how long ago it was, and that even they are not like busy pushing getting to yes anymore. Bill Urey's new book actually debunks the whole idea that we can take a transactional approach to situations where people have relational conflict. So nonetheless, it's good to peel back the onion and look at the lemon. So remember, we were all trained, if we were trained in this model with a lemon or an orange, that if we spend some time exploring the problem, if there's only one lemon left on this island where I live, and two people are going to compete over it, They're going to fight over the lemon, the only lemon, and what will happen is either one will win and one will lose, you know this, or maybe they'll squeeze it so hard it falls into the cat litter box and nobody wants the lemon anymore. So it's a win-lose situation. And we've all been trained that compromise is sometimes good, but often we can do better. So in this model, we don't want to go straight to compromise, but a compromise would be split the lemon, you each get half, and you might go away equally dissatisfied, equally satisfied, like whatever, at least it's done. The problem is solved. No one's fighting over the only lemon anymore. And where our model takes us into really, really fertile territory for finding great solutions is to explore what each person needs about the lemon. And you might find one needs the juice, one needs the peel, and one needs the seeds. And then you can find all kinds of ways for win-win-win. And yet, we find so often, especially in relational conflict, which is where I spend my time, that people resist finding win-win when they're feeling strongly emotionally attached to their outcome or to their certainty that this other person is just out to screw them. And so I want to just unpack the key principles. In this model, there's a lot of assumptions based on people's ability to be rational and use an objective criteria to make some decisions. So separate the people from the problem is something you've all probably utilized in your own work. Focusing on interests, not positions, helping clients make the shift so that you can expand the notion of what's possible and get truly as close as possible to win-win. And then, of course, my favorite, use the objective criteria to evaluate options. So this is all about make lemon cake, make lemonade. If you're in California, you can probably grow a lemon tree. And so one more slide just to get us into the foundations of this model that most of us are using. It does define conflict as a struggle over the thing, right? Our focus remains on the lemon and finding a way to problem solve it in relation to my goal, my needs, my desires, and their incompatibility or compatibility with yours. So that this is a very, very effective problem-solving approach when people are willing and able to shift from positions and try to find maximum win-win outcomes, right? And we've all experienced moments where this works. So one more thing to remember, that it's truly built on an individual social theory that makes all kinds of assumptions about rationality and how people will make rational decisions if we can just get them there. So in my world, the challenge with this, and I'm going to say all of us probably know this, but in my world, separating the people from the problem makes no sense at all. The people are the problem. It's their relationship, whether it's workplace, family, organizational, community. So when we try to get them to separate from the problem and focus on these other things to get to win-win, well, when they're not feeling it, when they're not really ready to do that, we're just pushing. And they'll perceive us as directing, pushing, steering, educating, informing. They're going to perceive us to be doing all the things that we were describing earlier as defensive behaviors. And then, of course, with the objective criteria to evaluate options, I just always wish that were the case, because then when clients heard what the law says about this, they'd say, oh, okay, let's do that. Or you come in with the finances and you can say, here's the best outcome financially. And they would go, let's do that. So if objective criteria was truly the beacon of satisfaction for clients to feel good about an outcome, I'm going to say in relational conflict, it doesn't happen. Because otherwise, how often have you been in the room or on the case where you're like, they could have it all. Could we just peel the lemon, squeeze it, and get on with it? All right? So part of it is that the principles behind this problem-solving model don't adequately account for what we know about people experiencing relational conflict, where their values are truly feeling insulted, offended, or threatened. And so I want to introduce you, before we go back to the group, to another way to look at what's going on when we're managing conflict behaviors. So the problem with problem solving is that when it doesn't work, we tend to think that there's a problem with someone. Like it's the problematic behavior. There's something going on that's keeping people away from this win-win thing that often, if we're being honest, many of us can see. But the parties are unable to see it. So with the insight approach to conflict, we look at behavior. And then whether you were to take this approach and make it your everyday way of being in interacting with people in conflict, or look at the way you're working now and imagine how this helps in the immediacy, in the moment when everyone's not listening, everyone's not cooperating, and it's very hard for you as the facilitator, the mediator, whatever your role is, to get people moving. And so, as opposed to the problem-solving definition of conflict, which urges us to pay attention to the issue or the problem to be solved, in insight, we look at conflict as basically a pattern of behaviors. Because how often have we seen that people can feel strongly differently about something and they're not in conflict? And then suddenly they are. So we can build efficiency into our work, whether we're problem solving or engaging in deeper dialogue to help people who are really needing some help with their relational conflict. We define it as insight practitioners as when what matters to me feels threatened, my behavior is going to shift. You're going to see me defending, interrupting, repeating, explaining, yeah, but, or quietly receding, withdrawing, or bringing it up at the next meeting and the next meeting, repeating, it keeps coming back. So when we think about those behaviors, what I'm inviting you to consider is that those behaviors, if we were to look at them as a pattern and let that be our definition of conflict, we can be more responsive in the moment rather than seeing the behaviors as the disruptors of the problem-solving method. So what happens is we want to find ways to get our clients and ourselves, because let's be honest, sometimes in those moments of conflict, I can get defensive myself. Thanks, Jeff, for joining the parade. If I feel threatened by you, and you might not even intend it, but I'm not going to be listening, I can't learn anything about new about you, and I'm going to be certain that you're out to get me, or my certainty gets heightened when I'm defending. And so my ability to learn something new or to engage in a different way is impacted. It's, in fact, could be considered, it's a cognitive impairment. I can't see anything but this tunnel and this dire outcome. And so what we want to do by looking at conflict as a pattern of behaviors, we don't want to get back focusing on the lemon. We want to take some time to ask questions, to probe, to be present to the moment, to try and ease the defensiveness. Not by manipulating or directing, but by noticing the behavior and wondering about it, rather than noticing the behavior and thinking, oh, I think it's this, so I'm going to do that. So bear with me. We start by noticing these behaviors, and this is the shorter list, but I'm going to just say one key takeaway could be, oh, when you notice these behaviors, stop problem solving. Just stop. And then, because the behavior itself is the clue that something matters that's feeling threatened. So let's be curious about that. And we want to wonder what is feeling threatened that matters so much. And through different types of strategies and interventions, we ask. But of course, in a short webinar, what I'm saying is our curiosity, our focus is on wondering rather than solving in this moment. And so that we might understand that what people are feeling, what's feeling threatened, could be very substantive and sort of surface level. Or, and this is where we'll really see the heightened behaviors, that something feels at risk that's threatening my identity, what it feels like to be a competent and capable director, what it feels like to be a caring co-parent, what it feels like to be a good neighbor. So whatever you're doing, if it's threatening something that matters to me, I'm going to defend. And so it might be my core values, or I might be defending because I feel like almost in my own mind that I'm not behaving in accordance with my values. And now I'm defending against myself. So in the emotional realm, we want to be attentive to the fact that this happens anyway, no matter what type of dispute you're working in, that people are concerned about things. People are worried about things. And so when their defending behavior pops up, we notice it and we stop telling. We incorporate the equivalent of some kind of acknowledgement of our noticing and then an ask. We want to keep our questions short and listen. Because the power of listening is what's going to be the thing that will get us, the word that came to mind was get us out of this awkward moment without forcing it, without calling someone out on their behaviors and saying, you agreed not to point the finger. Because if we're being honest, when we do that, it doesn't usually work. It might work in the moment. Someone might feel shamed or just reminded that they're going to behave differently, but you don't know what's going to happen in the parking lot or in the boardroom the next day. So what we want to do is make sure that we start with some kind of a bridge or an acknowledgement, and then we want to ask questions. And so the questions that we focus on in the insight approach are a flip between, what are you worried will happen if this policy is implemented? What are you most concerned about when you think about this upcoming meeting? Or, and I like this for impasse, moments where you might be a little bit down the road on a case and people are really starting to fight again, to have that honest question, what are you worried will happen if you're not able to reach agreement? And be real about it. And this isn't to manipulate people into being better problem solvers and better behaved. It's to actually bring an approach that defines conflict in a way that, to me, totally fits my day job. This is what you see every day. It's not so much that people don't want to work with us. They don't want to go along with our problem-solving approach. It's that, they can't. If I'm defending against something that means a lot to me, I can't learn anything new. And so my defending behavior will continue to be a disruptor of the process you're trying to bring me along. And eventually I'm going to blame you too, because I'm going to feel like you're ganging up on me. All right, so that's the context. I wanted to set that out as a compare and contrast the problem-solving model that most of us use, most of us were trained in, and truly, when it works, it's great. And the reality that most of us who work in dispute resolution or conflict resolution experience, and that is that there's a lot of times it doesn't work. So I want to leave a moment here for questions or comments in case you want me to go in a certain direction. I really would love to hear your thoughts, particularly those of you who work with people who have relationships that they're going to be managing after their process with you.
Please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand and we'll ask a question. Jacinta, I had a thought while you were speaking. When I was a kid and in competitive sports, the fear of not getting the position, the fear of not doing well, the fear of not performing at my highest level would create self-doubt. And I would talk to my great-gran over a cup of coffee, or a cup of tea rather, because she's an old Scottish woman and tea fixes everything.
Everything.
And everything. And I would say, I don't think I did very well in this ballet audition. I'm certain I didn't get the part. And her answer back was, maybe you didn't. What's the worst thing that could happen if you didn't get this part? And I would have to admit, well, I guess nothing. I'd keep dancing and keep auditioning. She said, well, that doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah.
That
So
doesn't
she
sound
did.
so bad. And it
So
was a really nice check and balance, that the thing that was keeping me awake at night, the thing that was giving me, the flop sweats, was put into a really lovely perspective by just saying, well, what's the worst thing that could happen here?
and what your grandmother did, she asked. Okay? So let's remember that is a question. And if she had said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm sure you're going to make it. You're the best in the team," which is what so many times people do. We go to reassurance, and when we're making it worse, we're like, "Why didn't that help?" So hold that thought. We can break down moments when a telling response will almost never work. Almost never. I want to talk about a couple of examples where it sometimes does. And that's the tricky thing about human behavior and the way we all roll. So thanks for that great example. How many of you have had a moment with clients where you do the reassuring and they're like, "You can't possibly understand how hard this is"? Yeah, I see you nodding, Peg.
I would just I really resonated with this approach. And a couple months ago, David Hoffman spoke to us. And one of the things he said that really lines up with some of what you've said is so often in mediation, what's at stake is people's goodness.
Yeah.
And what you're saying often brings that out, particularly like in a lot of single plaintiff employment disputes,
Oh,
people's
yeah.
professional reputation is on the line.
Yeah.
And so I just really appreciate what you've been saying, and that very much kind of lines up with this perspective that I bring into particularly where relationship is at stake, that what people might be defending the most is their goodness.
Yeah, and Peg, what I love about the insight approach is that it challenges us to stop thinking we know what's at stake, right? And
Yes.
and so it's interesting because I presented with the Massachusetts Council in December, and David was there. So I have to call out the problem solving model. I'm sorry, we really have to say yes. There are other things at stake for sure, but can we also just appreciate that this dominant model that's been exported around the world has some theoretical foundations that don't actually fit in relational conflict, and accept
Yeah.
it's a model and call it that, a problem solving model that can work really well, rather than saying, in the context of this individualist based social theory, this model that came out of Harvard way back when, and that urges us to separate the people from the problem and use an objective criteria to evaluate options. Actually, that's just not the model for relational conflict, right? Another way to look at it is to say, what's the theory underpinning the approach we're choosing to take at any given moment? And so where insight mediation changed everything for me was understanding the theoretical foundation, which I'll just touch on quickly. It's built on a learning theory, and it's built on a social theory that is relational. So it assumes that our behaviors are responsive to our environment, to the people around us, that there's always this thing going on that's affecting how I perceive what's going on around me and how I react to it. So that's one big piece of it. And then the learning theory piece is that the interventions that we want to use, and I think this will make sense to you, the interventions that we want to bring is to open up learning, not to get to outcome, because they can't make decisions about a good outcome while they're defending. And then when they're ready, like what I find really helpful is that the problem solving model of expanding the notion of what's possible is not just because we're using the problem-solving model. It's because people have released their defenses and they're ready to find engaging ways to follow through. And if you're like me, you'll find that by the time you're getting to looking at possibilities, I don't use options anymore, I use possibilities, there's more creativity because people aren't defending. You're not cognitively impaired anymore by this threat. So I wanted to finish that piece because a lot of people, particularly those who come from a social science background, if you have a social science background, you'll appreciate that there's theory underpinning this. Robert.
One of the things to me that's the hardest in mediations and in relationships is, and when I went through mentoring, the mentor said, first thing you need to tell people is get your damn ego out of the way. Because that really is underlies a lot of what you've described. And he said he was a country music fan, and he quoted, and I wrote it down. He said, I know I probably don't know what I think I do. And he said, what I've got to do is I'm 99% right. And he said, get your ego out of the way, go find out and do what's best for your client. But to me, we get so defensive in that shell. And as you've described it in better psychological terms, but it's our ego.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great way to look at it, Robert. I think lawyers can hear that because we're trained to figure out that, like, honestly, what I love about what you're saying is that it is true we have to get our egos out of it. And in order to do that, I think we have to redefine our role. Because if I know that when I'm getting looped back into my protective advocate lawyer role, I find it hard to describe that as ego because I think I'm being protective. So it's almost like, how can we realign our values with the work that we're doing, and how can we redefine our role when we're advocates, but particularly where we're in the middle, whether we're participating in mediation, whether we are mediating. And I don't, honestly, even arbitrators, and I'll say even because I don't know much about arbitration, and so I don't talk about it much, just so you know. But the people who are in the room with the people who have the decisions to make, we need humility. And curiosity gets us there. They're very related. But Robert, I love that observation you're making and bringing, especially to a room full of, I think a lot of us are lawyers, and it's hard to drop that protective advocacy piece. Leon.
Sometimes it's the lawyer who is defensive more so than the client.
Oh.
And sometimes the lawyer's ego is at stake more so than the client's ego. And that really gets in the way. And so I'd like for you to talk about that and how to respond to that, if you would.
Yeah. Okay, so this is what's so challenging. On the one hand, it does depend on your role. So if your role in the room is to manage the people in the room, so if I'm mediating and counsel are present, or the lawyers are present and their behaviors are challenging, which I'm going to say is pretty common, it helps for me to remember that they, just like the clients, are going to end up defending. So you're totally hitting that on the head. And so my approach has to be curious. And so there's no way we're going to take a break until this is done, to give an example. Then a question might be, because you've got to relate to the content, either what are you worried will happen if we take a break? Or what are you worried will happen if we don't take a break? And so you want to ask a question that will just get people to think, well, what am I? And if you get a defensive, I'm not worried about anything, then the ego is still there. So you know that you have to do some more work. And the challenge with lawyer behavior is, everyone, is the early slides that were called defending behaviors. Those are stereotypical lawyer advocacy behaviors. Proving it, Exhibit A, interrupting, justifying, explaining, Maybe if I say it a different way, you'll get it this time. All of those behaviors get in the way of the people who need to have the discussion. And so another way to look at threat that insight handles beautifully is to flip it. So what do you worry, what do you worry will happen if you're not able to reach an agreement today? Let everybody ponder and answer. The other way is, what are you hoping will be better if you're able to have productive discussions today and find a way through? And so in insight, because remember, everything we're doing is theoretically grounded in opening people up to learning. All I care about, without worrying about what the answer to the question will be, is, will the question lead to pondering? Will asking lead someone to go, I mean, my favorite moments are, I never really thought about that before. Or, God, I had no idea, right? Or, that's a really good question. But my experience with lawyers is that without curiosity and humility, we just knee-jerk back to, you don't get to control this, or if we don't get this done, they're going to change their mind overnight, or whatever. Do stupid arguments that don't even fit with human, like neuroscience and behavior. We're trying to push an outcome because we think that's our jobs. So I think it's very challenging for us working in the dispute resolution field if we don't redefine people's roles. And in relational conflict, where I get defensive is when the lawyers, because I'm more often the mediator, by the way. I actually was an advocate again on a collaborative case at the end of the year and into this year. I kept forgetting I was the lawyer because I like being the one that makes it happen in the middle. So this is fresh in my mind. The challenge is to support the lawyer's role. But you can't do that in the moment because they're going to defend. That's why preparation is so, so vital. And I don't know why we pay short shrift to the need to have a pre-brief, a planning meeting where the mediator and the lawyers have a free exchange regarding their roles in the room before the mediator simply imposes, this is how I'm going to do it. I want to give you an example because, of course, any of you that are working in collaborative teams will have experienced what it's like to have lawyers and people who are not lawyers, often with a mental health background, working in collaborative practice. So you've got, say, a lawyer in a meeting saying, listen, we can't take another break. We've got to push through to the end. If we don't, and this is, say, a professional team discussion, if we don't get this parenting thing sorted out, look, I just think we might as well give up. I think my client's going to leave the process and it's going to be a big mess. And everyone immediately is driven to trying to convince that lawyer to go along with the recommendation that maybe the parenting expert is recommending. No one thinks to ask, what are you worried will happen if this takes too long? And then the lawyer doesn't get a chance to articulate, well, actually, I mean, I'm worried about the status quo. Anyone who knows family law knows that there are some places where they play a status quo card. And if you go to court in an interim basis, you're going to be stuck with the status quo. So the lawyer gets to reveal the threat to care, the threat to the thing that matters to them in their role as far as being competent, capable. It's not just about, I'll get sued. It's that I care about this client. I invited them to participate in this process, and I'm really worried about what the implications might be if we drag this out any longer. It would change the entire dynamic of the people who are in the room. And we find it hard to ask those questions for some reason. And I think it has to do with the way we define our role and the fact that we're bringing this problem-solving model over that says separate the people from the problem. and try to just get to win-win. When people are experiencing a threat to their very capabilities, their competency, their practice, as Peg was, their reputation as a good problem solver, as someone who gets the job done. And so where I see huge progress is in the pause, because I've noticed something that's telling me there's defending. It might be the lawyers, it might be the parties. And I have to not think I know what's going on. Because if I think I know what's going on, I'm going to try and explain it away, or as long as I think I know something, I am not curious. And if the power of curiosity, if you buy it, like that's what the brain scans and that's what all the research is telling us, if you can't fake it, like if you're not really wondering, you're going to use your steering, directing, highly polished skill of finessing and quasi-manipulating some people to go in the direction you think they should go, because you do think you know what's best. And what I have found is that I am more efficient because I don't waste all my time thinking I know. I ask. And clients of many different personality types appreciate being asked, because no one wants you to think that, no one likes it when you think, oh, I've got you figured out. Oh, I know you, or I know what you need. So everything that we do when we're directing, nudging, pushing, steering, kindly, gently moving people forward, if you notice that they continue to resist, just know it's time to stop telling. And if you like the theoretical foundation that I'm presenting, it's called insight mediation. And it actually, so the book is Practicing Insight Mediation by Cheryl Picard. She's a Canadian, so she's not as famous. But William Urey's new book, I want to talk about that for a minute. So his new book is called Possible. And I want you to know that I switched from generating options to exploring possibilities 5 years ago, when I was really embedding insight mediation into my everyday life. So when he came out with the book Possible, I'm like, oh, I better get it. And so what's beautiful about this book is that Urey humbly acknowledges that, he doesn't say it this way, but it's like, why are they still reading Getting to Yes? I mean, everything's moved far beyond that, looking at relational conflict. And most conflicts have a relational component to them. And then he tells a lot of great stories about some international conflicts that he's worked on, really interesting stories. And then he provides a metaphor. And so his metaphor is this. In order for us, first of all, he says, we got to do way more listening, stop the damn telling. Okay, so I'm like, oh, good. I can say, after I diss the interest-based problem-solving model, I can say, even he agrees. We have to do far more listening and less telling. But then Bill Urey's metaphor is, we've got to get the parties to the balcony. You want to zoom in, zoom out. Take a wide look, and then build a golden bridge, not just a bridge, a golden bridge, and then access third-siders. So that's the language of his metaphor. And so then he builds a beautiful metaphor, and if you like it, yay. And what he doesn't do, he doesn't teach us how to get people to the damn balcony when they don't want to go, right? So what's missing in a lot of the problem-solving literature and model are theoretically grounded skills and strategies to help people want to take the stairs and then zoom in, zoom out, let alone build the damn bridge. So where I've been really working, particularly the last 5 years, is totally changing the way I teach mediation and conflict resolution. Because without this piece, we'll continue to either blame ourselves, oh, I sucked in that meeting, or maybe I should have done this, or we'll blame the parties because often it is their behaviors. You say you want this done, And yet, you won't provide the documents that I requested 3 months ago, or all of those things. You want it done, it's costing too much, it's taking too long, blah, blah, blah. Well, the problem solving model keeps directing us back to deal with the thing that they're saying, oh, blah, blah, maybe we're problem solving. Insight says, I wonder why you're still here. I don't have doors that lock. So if someone is so dissatisfied with their experience of what's going on, they could choose to leave, and they often don't. So what insight helps us do is stay in the moment when our clients, the parties, seem to want more than just the deal. Or else they could just have had lawyers write letters and get an evaluator in, or have an arbitrator issue a judge. Why? So in many ways, insight calls on us to be curious without saying it this way. But why are they still here if this sucks so much? And so it gives us strategies that are grounded in, what could I do now to bring calm and to invite someone to be open to discovering something new. That's what it's about. And that's why the strategies are built from noticing first. You notice the problematic behavior. Call it what you will, but I think you all, if you use the word defensiveness, we all know what that looks like. Notice the behavior. Stop thinking you know what it's about. Don't tell. Don't direct. Don't nudge. Don't. Just notice it and wonder about it. And then this approach gives us probably 4 different things you could do, okay, to manage that moment. And we call it targeted curiosity. We're not just sitting in wonder. We're not going for a beer. We're actually noticing something and wondering about it, and that will lead us to our response. We're going to wonder about the threat that's leading to the defending, or we might wonder about the reason they're still here. Why are you still here? Their motivation for sticking around to have a convo, or really, when you're wondering, it's what the hell? How do they interpret that way? You're wondering how are they interpreting one another? So we have 3 targeted areas of curiosity that is more efficient. We spend no time guessing anymore, and we are more efficiently able to manage those awkward, comfortable, churning moments so that we can get to that beautiful thing that we're all so good at, which is problem solving, right? Except that the problems will look very different at the end because some of them have been sorted out. So that's my introduction to insight. I've done a lot of work to develop training modules around insight, and my program is called The Curious Mediator. But I want you to also know that insight led me to change how I do everything. Everything. And it's been the most profoundly satisfying shift in my whole career. And I did the hard work because I submitted to mentoring with Cheryl Picard, the founder. Basically, I always laugh. I say, Cheryl, I always tell people you kick my ass. So I let her work really hard on me. I took Tuesdays off in 2017 to study this and have begun to create digestible pieces that we can bring to our practices. And those of you who are looking for something truly transformative that makes sense, I would really encourage you to get in touch because it's a growing global community of insight mediators. I thank you for coming to our webinar today.
Jacinta Gallant, thank you so much. That was insightful. There's no other word for it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Very thought-provoking, and you've given us some real tools to use when we hit those brick wall moments in mediations. As my late friend, Dr. Mark Goulston, used to say, the human mind is not capable of being both curious and on the attack at the same time.
You know it. And so it's so habit forming for lawyers. It's really, really hard to break.
Yes, and stepping back and being curious. and even just asking sometimes, what would you like to see happen now? And how can I help you get there? And just being curious when you stop pushing and just open a door, a lot of things, a lot of great things can happen. Thank you so much. This is a wonderful program. I know I'll be contributing to Food Bank in your honor. We hope that people contribute to food banks in their own local communities or World Central Kitchen if they're looking for a particular place to contribute. Jacinta Gallant, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. And with that, we are complete.
See ya.
Thank you.